It was almost 11 at night. Brittany stood at the folding table inside a laundromat on 8th Street, pressing the wrinkles out of her daughter's school uniform. Kayla was asleep on a plastic chair, her head resting on an old backpack. Micah, just 4 years old, was curled up on the floor beneath a thin blanket. The door opened. A man walked in, wearing a faded hoodie, carrying a bag of laundry. He sat down next to her and nodded. She smiled back. She had no idea that the man sitting beside her owned this entire building and 47 others across the city. And that quiet Tuesday night, between the hum of washing machines and the soft breathing of her sleeping children, a conversation would begin that would completely change the course of her life. But not in the way you would expect, not even close. Join me as we dive into this powerful story. But before we do, someone once told me that this channel would never make it past 5,000 subscribers, that nobody wants to hear stories like this anymore. I think they were wrong, and I think you and I can prove it. So, if you are new here, kindly click the subscribe button below, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story tonight, because that is exactly what this is, a good story, a real one, and I promise you, by the end, you will feel something. Thank you. Now let us go back to that laundromat. To understand what happened that night, you need to know who that man in the hoodie really was. Jordan Moore was 42 years old. On paper, he was the CEO of Moore Capital Properties, a real estate empire that owned over 300 residential buildings across the Southeast. His signature sat on leases worth more money than most people would earn in 50 lifetimes. He lived alone in a penthouse on the 39th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. The place was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble countertops, a kitchen that could seat 12. But here is the thing about Jordan Moore's penthouse. There were no photographs on the walls, no magnets on the refrigerator, no shoes by the door that belonged to anyone else. The place looked like a showroom, expensive and empty. Because that is exactly what it was. Jordan had not always lived like this. He grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled like someone else's cooking coming through the vents. His mother, Patricia Moore, raised him alone. She cleaned hotel rooms during the day. 16 rooms, a shift, sometimes 18 if someone called in sick. And 3 nights a week, she worked at a laundromat on Halsted Street, washing and folding other people's clothes for extra cash. Jordan would sit on the plastic chairs in that laundromat after school, doing his homework under the fluorescent lights while the dryers hummed around him. Sometimes he would fall asleep there. His mother would carry him to the bus stop. When her shift ended, his face pressed against her shoulder, the smell of warm fabric softener in his hair. He remembered everything about those nights. The way the machines rattled when the loads were uneven. The way his mother's hands were always dry and cracked. The way she would hum gospel songs under her breath while she folded strangers' shirts into perfect squares. He ran his thumb over the scar on his left palm, a small burn from when he was 6. He had pressed his hand against a dryer door, trying to stay warm on a January night while his mother worked. She had cried when she saw it. He told her it did not hurt. It did. Patricia Moore never got to see what her son became. She died of a heart attack 3 weeks before his college graduation. The doctors said it was cardiac arrest. But Jordan knew the truth. His mother died of exhaustion. She had worked herself to death so that he could have a chance, and she never got to see him take it. That was 23 years ago. Jordan had built everything since then with her name in his mind. Every building he bought, every deal he closed, every dollar he earned. It was all for her, even though she was gone. And it was because of Patricia that Jordan did something most billionaires would never do. Once a month, he put on old clothes, left his penthouse, and visited the buildings he owned. Not the luxury ones. Not the high-rises. The affordable housing complexes. The Section 8 buildings. The places where people like his mother lived. He would sit in the lobbies, ride the elevators, walk the hallways, check the laundry rooms, talk to the tenants when they let him. He never told them who he was. He just listened. Because his mother had been a tenant her whole life, and no landlord had ever cared enough to check. Tonight, Jordan was checking on Ridgewood Terrace. It was a 64-unit building on the east side of the city, affordable housing, working families. The kind of place where people stretched every dollar until it screamed. He had been getting complaints through the tenant portal for months. Broken elevators, no hot water, laundry machines down. But his building manager, a man named Reggie Crawford, kept filing reports that said everything was fine, all issues resolved, no outstanding maintenance requests. Jordan did not believe him. So here he was, faded hoodie, old jeans, a bag of laundry he had packed himself, walking into the laundromat on 8th Street at 10:45 on a Tuesday night, because the laundry room in Ridgewood Terrace was broken, and if his own tenants had to come here to wash their clothes at nearly midnight, then he wanted to know why. Jordan Moore owned buildings, but he had never forgotten what it felt like to have nowhere to call home. Now let me tell you about the woman he sat down next to. Brittany Simmons was 31 years old. She had 2 children, Kayla 7 and Micah 4. She worked as a certified nursing assistant at Magnolia Gardens, a nursing home on the west side of the city, from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. 3 nights a week, she cleaned offices in a downtown building from 8 until midnight. She lived in apartment 314 at Ridgewood Terrace, a 2-bedroom unit with a kitchen faucet that dripped a bathroom where the hot water had not worked in 3 months and a front door lock on the building entrance that had been broken since the summer. She had filed 6 maintenance requests. 6. Not one of them had been answered. Brittany was one of more than 10 million single mothers in America trying to do the impossible. Raise children while barely surviving. Her day started at 5:30 every morning. She would wake up before the sun, move quietly so the kids could sleep a few more minutes, and start making breakfast. Pancakes from scratch most days because the mix was cheaper when you bought flour and eggs separately. Kayla would help crack the eggs. She was good at it. Hardly ever got shell in the batter anymore. By 6:45, Brittany was walking Kayla to school. Micah came along because the bus did not run their route. She would drop Micah with Mrs. Paulette, a 74-year-old neighbor on the 2nd floor who watched him during the day. Mrs. Paulette never charged her. In return, Brittany carried the old woman's laundry down 4 flights of stairs every week and picked up her groceries on Saturdays. That was how it worked in their building. People helped each other because nobody else was going to. At the nursing home, Brittany spent 8 hours lifting patients, changing beds, and cleaning up after people who could not clean up after themselves. She never complained. She once spent 45 minutes singing hymns to a woman with Alzheimer's because the woman could not sleep and the night staff had not arrived yet. She held the hands of people whose own families never visited. She wiped tears from faces she would never see again. Her hands smelled like latex and bleach by noon. By midnight, they smelled like detergent. They never smelled like nothing. Her ex-husband Curtis had left when Micah was 1 year old. No warning, no argument. He just stopped coming home one day, and then his phone was disconnected, and then it was like he had never existed at all. Brittany did not have time to be angry about it. She did not have time to grieve. She had 2 children who needed to eat a rent check that was due and a mother who had just had a stroke and could no longer live alone. Her mother, Denise, was in a nursing home now. Not the one where Brittany worked, but a decent one across town. The monthly cost ate through almost half of Brittany's income, but Brittany never missed a payment because her mother had never missed a single one of hers. One evening, Kayla had looked up from her homework and asked a question that stopped Brittany cold. "Mommy, are we poor?" Brittany had knelt down, taken her daughter's hands, and smiled. "No, baby. We are rich in all the ways that matter." It was the kind of thing you say to protect your children, but Brittany meant it because she had something that money could not buy. She had people who loved her, and she had never once stopped fighting for them. That night, the night she met Jordan, Brittany was at the laundromat because the machines in her building were broken. Again. She had brought Kayla and Micah with her because Mrs. Paulette had a doctor's appointment early the next morning and needed her sleep. So here they were, almost 11 at night, Kayla asleep on a chair, Micah curled on the floor, and Brittany folding tiny shirts and little socks under buzzing lights, trying to get everything done before the last bus home. Brittany Simmons did not need saving. She just needed one person to notice how hard she was fighting. When Jordan walked into that laundromat and saw Brittany standing at the folding table with 2 sleeping children beside her, something hit him in the chest. Hard. He stopped in the doorway for just a second. Because for a moment, he was not looking at a stranger. He was looking at his mother. Same tired shoulders. Same careful hands. Same quiet determination in the way she folded each small shirt, like it mattered. Like everything mattered. He looked away. Just for a second, just long enough to push the memory back down. Then he walked to the row of machines, loaded his clothes and fed quarters into the slot, and sat down on the plastic chair closest to the door. Brittany glanced over at him. "You need change?" she asked. "The machine by the door only takes quarters." Jordan looked up. "That would be great. Thanks." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small zip bag filled with coins, handed him 4 quarters. "I always bring extra," she said. "These machines are picky." Jordan thanked her and started his load. For a few minutes they just sat in the hum of the machines. The laundromat was quiet, just the 2 of them and the sleeping children. It was Brittany who spoke first. "Late night, huh?" Jordan nodded. "Could not sleep. Figured I would get something done." She smiled at that. "Same here. This is the only time my day is quiet. Between the kids and work laundry at 11 p.m. is basically my spa day." Jordan almost laughed. Something about the way she said it. Not bitter, not complaining, just honest. "Your kids?" he asked, nodding toward the chairs. "Kayla and Micah." Brittany said, her voice softening the way it always did when she talked about them. "Kayla is 7. She is in 2nd grade. Reads everything she can get her hands on. Micah just started pre-K. He is a little shy, but once he warms up to you, he will not stop talking." She paused. "They are good kids. They are the best thing I have ever done." Jordan looked at the little boy, curled on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, his small chest rising and falling, and the memory hit again. The dryer hum, the plastic chairs, his mother's hands folding shirts that were not theirs. He swallowed hard. As if on cue, Micah stirred. His eyes opened, confused, and then his face crumbled. He let out a cry. Not loud, but enough. Brittany was there in a heartbeat. She scooped him up with one arm, settling him on her hip, whispering something into his hair. But her other hand was still reaching for the laundry, still trying to fold, still trying to keep everything moving. Jordan did not think about it. He just stood up, walked to the folding table, and started folding the small pile of children's clothes that was sitting there. He did it without asking. Brittany looked at him, surprised. "Oh, you do not have to do that. It is fine." "Really?" Jordan said. "I do not mind." He folded a tiny pair of jeans with 2 quick motions, creasing them perfectly along the seam. Then a small t-shirt. Then another. Brittany watched him. "You have done this before," she said. It was not a question. Jordan kept folding. "My mom used to bring me to places like this when I was a kid," he said quietly. "I used to help her fold for hours." Brittany studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. Something passed between them. A recognition. Not of names or stories, but of a feeling. The feeling of knowing what it means to grow up in a place like this. They talked more after that. Easy conversation. Nothing heavy. Brittany mentioned that she lived in the building down the block. Ridgewood Terrace. "Nice enough place," she said. "But the building manager is useless. Our laundry machines have been broken for 3 months. He keeps saying he will fix them. Never does. That is why I am here." Jordan's hands went still for just a second. 3 months, 3 months, Brittany repeated. "The hot water cuts out too, and the elevator has not worked since July. We are on the 3rd floor, so it is fine for us. But Mrs. Paulette on the 2nd floor, she is 74. She should not be carrying groceries up the stairs." Jordan said nothing. But inside, something shifted. A slow burn. This was his building. These were his tenants, and Reggie Crawford had been telling him everything was fine. Before Brittany gathered her kids and her laundry bags to leave, she reached into her purse and pulled out a granola bar. The wrapper was slightly bent, like it had been sitting in her bag for a while. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "You look like you have not eaten in a while. Take this." Jordan stared at it. He could feel the weight of it, not the bar itself, but the gesture. This woman who worked 2 jobs, who could barely afford her own rent, who was doing laundry at 11 p.m. with her children sleeping on the floor, was giving him food. Because she thought he needed it more than she did. "Thank you," he said. His voice was thick. Brittany smiled. "Everybody needs a little something," she said. "Stay safe out there." She lifted Micah onto her hip, took Kayla's hand, and walked out into the night. The door swung shut behind her. Jordan sat there holding that granola bar like it weighed 100 pounds, because it did. It weighed the same as every meal his mother had skipped so he could eat. Jordan's driver was parked 2 blocks away, a black sedan with tinted windows, engine still running. Jordan climbed into the back seat and closed the door. The shift was immediate. 1 second he was a man in a faded hoodie sitting in a laundromat. The next he was sitting on leather seats that cost more than Brittany's annual rent. He looked down at the granola bar still in his hand. The wrapper was creased. The corner was slightly torn. It was the cheapest brand you could buy at a gas station. And it was the most expensive gift anyone had given him in years, because it cost her something. He pulled out his phone and called Tanya. She picked up on the second ring even though it was almost midnight. Tanya had been his executive assistant for 9 years. She knew his schedule better than he did. She also knew not to ask questions when he called this late. "Tanya, first thing tomorrow morning, I want every maintenance report from Ridgewood Terrace for the last 12 months. Every work order, every tenant complaint, everything." There was a pause. "Ridgewood Terrace. That is one of Reggie Crawford's buildings, right?" "It is," Jordan said. "And I want it all on my desk by 8. The next morning, Jordan sat in his corner office on the 22nd floor of Moore Capital's headquarters. The Atlanta skyline stretched out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. On his desk sat a thick folder. Reggie Crawford's maintenance reports for Ridgewood Terrace. He opened it and started reading. Every page told the same story. Issue reported. Issue resolved. No outstanding problems. The language was clean, professional, almost too clean. Broken washing machines in the laundry room. Resolved November 14th. Elevator malfunction 3rd floor. Resolved December 2nd. Hot water heater inspection. Passed January 10th. Jordan read every line. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the tenant complaint portal, the system that allowed residents to submit issues directly to Moore Capital's corporate office. He had never checked it personally. That was supposed to be Reggie's job. What he found made his stomach turn. There were 47 open complaints from Ridgewood Terrace in the last 12 months. 47. Not one of them matched Reggie's reports. Tenants had been filing complaints about broken laundry machines since September. 9 months, not 3. The hot water had been cutting out since the previous winter. The elevator had been down for 5 months, not the 2 weeks Reggie had reported. And the front door lock, the one that was supposed to keep the building secure, it had been broken since June. 6 months. Anyone could walk in off the street at any time. Jordan closed the laptop and sat back in his chair. He pressed his fingers against his temples. He knew the statistics. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, millions of rental units across the country violated basic safety codes. Thousands of tenants lived in buildings with broken smoke detectors, faulty wiring, and no heat in winter. Most of them never complained because they were afraid. Afraid of retaliation. Afraid of eviction. Afraid that speaking up would make things worse instead of better. And the landlords who let it happen, they had a name for it. Deferred maintenance. But Jordan knew what it really was. It was neglect. And he never thought it would be happening in a building with his name on the deed. He called Tanya back in. "I need you to pull the maintenance budget for Ridgewood Terrace. What Reggie was allocated versus what he actually spent. Go back 3 years. Tanya returned 2 hours later with a spreadsheet. The numbers were not complicated. They were just ugly. Reggie Crawford had been allocated $340,000 per year for maintenance at Ridgewood Terrace. In the last 12 months, actual spending on repairs and upkeep totaled roughly $80,000. That left $260,000 unaccounted for. Jordan stared at the numbers, his jaw tightened. Where did it go? Tanya shook her head. I am still pulling the receipts, but so far a lot of the vendor invoices look inflated. Some of them might be fabricated entirely. Jordan wanted to call Reggie right then. He wanted to drive to Ridgewood Terrace, drag the man out of his office, and fire him on the spot. But he did not, because Jordan had not built a billion-dollar company by acting on impulse. If he fired Reggie now, the man would disappear. He would get another job at another building and do the same thing to another group of tenants who could not fight back. Jordan wanted more than a termination. He wanted a prosecution. Keep digging, he told Tanya. I want everything documented. Every dollar. Every fake invoice. Every lie. And do not let Reggie know we are looking. Tanya nodded and left. Jordan turned his chair toward the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there in a building he owned, a woman was getting her children ready for school in an apartment with no hot water. And the man he had trusted to take care of that building had been stealing from it for years. Jordan had spent his career buying buildings, but until tonight, he had never truly looked at who lived inside them. The next morning, Brittany's alarm went off at 5:30. She reached over and silenced it before it could wake the kids. The apartment was dark. The kitchen faucet was dripping again. That steady tap, tap, tap that had become the soundtrack of her mornings. She lay there for 10 seconds, not because she wanted more sleep, but because 10 seconds was all she allowed herself before the day began. Then she got up. The kitchen was small. Just enough counter space for a cutting board and a mixing bowl. She pulled out flour, baking powder, an egg, and the last of the milk. Pancakes from scratch. Kayla had asked for cereal, once the kind that came in the bright-colored box with the cartoon on the front. Brittany had done the math in her head. $4.60 for a box that would last 3 days, or $2 worth of flour and eggs that would last a week. The math always won. Kayla appeared in the doorway in her school uniform, rubbing her eyes. "Can I help?" Brittany smiled. "Come crack the egg for me. You are getting really good at it." Kayla climbed onto the step stool and cracked the egg into the bowl. Clean break, no shell. Brittany kissed the top of her head. "Perfect, just like you." By 6:45 they were out the door. Brittany carried Micah on her hip because he was still half asleep. Kayla held her hand and talked the entire walk to school about a book she was reading. Something about butterflies and how they had to struggle to get out of the cocoon or their wings would not work. "Mommy, did you know that if you help a butterfly out of its cocoon, it dies?" Brittany looked at her daughter. "I did not know that. It is because the struggle is what makes them strong," Kayla said seriously. "Their teacher told them that yesterday." Brittany squeezed her daughter's hand. "I think your teacher is a smart lady." She dropped Kayla at the front entrance and watched her disappear through the double doors with her backpack bouncing. Then she walked 2 blocks back to Ridgewood Terrace and knocked on Mrs. Paulette's door. The old woman answered in her housecoat, already smiling. "There is my little man," Mrs. Paulette said, reaching for Micah. He went to her willingly. He always did. "Thank you, Mrs. Paulette," Brittany said. "I will pick him up by 5. You take your time, honey. We are going to have a good day. Are we not, Micah?" Micah nodded and buried his face in the old woman's shoulder. Brittany kissed his cheek and left. She took the bus 14 blocks to Magnolia Gardens, the nursing home where she worked. She clocked in at 7:58, 2 minutes early. She was always 2 minutes early. For the next 8 hours, Brittany lifted patients out of beds, changed soiled sheets, helped people eat who could no longer feed themselves, and cleaned up after people who had once been somebody's everything and were now mostly forgotten. In room 12 there was a woman named Dorothy who had Alzheimer's. Dorothy did not know her own name most days. She did not recognize her children when they visited, which was rarely. But she remembered songs. old hymns from a church she had attended 50 years ago. Every afternoon, Dorothy would get agitated. She would pull at her blankets and cry for people who were not there. The other aides would give her space, wait for it to pass. But Brittany would sit on the edge of Dorothy's bed and sing, low and soft, the same hymn every time. And Dorothy would go still. Her hands would stop pulling. Her eyes would close, and she would sleep. Nobody asked Brittany to do that. It was not in her job description. She did it because Dorothy was a person, and every person deserved to be treated like one. In room 20, there was a man named Harold who had lost both legs to diabetes. Harold was angry at the world. He cursed at the aides. He threw his food. He told everyone who came near him to leave him alone. Most of the staff avoided his room. Brittany did not. She would walk in every morning and say the same thing. "Good morning, Harold. Ready for breakfast?" And Harold would grumble and complain and call her stubborn. And then he would eat, because she stayed. By 4 o'clock, Brittany's back ached, and her feet throbbed, and her hands smelled like latex and antiseptic. She took the bus home, picked up Micah from Mrs. Paulette, walked to get Kayla from aftercare, and started dinner. Rice and beans, stretching the last of the chicken from Sunday into something that tasted like enough. After dinner, she helped Kayla with homework. Kayla was working on a presentation about someone who made a difference. She had chosen Martin Luther King Jr., Mommy. How did Dr. King stay strong when everything was so hard? Brittany looked at her daughter. He remembered what he was fighting for. Kayla thought about that for a moment. Then she nodded and went back to writing. At 8:15, Brittany put both kids to bed. She read Micah a story. She braided Kayla's hair for the morning. She kissed them both and turned off the light. Then she changed into her cleaning clothes, locked the apartment door, and walked 3 blocks to the office building where she worked her second job. The building was empty at night, just Brittany and the hum of the air conditioning. She vacuumed hallways, emptied trash cans, wiped down desks, and cleaned bathrooms, 1 floor at a time, alone. Somewhere around 10:30, standing in a dark hallway with a mop in her hand, Brittany stopped for a moment, not because she was tired. She was always tired. She stopped because the silence got loud. In moments like these, she thought about Curtis. Not with anger, not with longing, just with a kind of dull ache. Not for him specifically, but for the idea of someone to split the load with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to say you are doing a good job and mean it. She leaned the mop against the wall and closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she opened them. "You have handled worse," she whispered to herself. "Keep going." She picked up the mop and finished the floor. Brittany did not have time to feel sorry for herself. She had 2 children who needed her to be everything: mother, father, provider, protector, and she refused to let them down. 1 week later, Jordan walked back into the laundromat on 8th Street. Same hoodie, same bag of laundry, same time. He told himself he was there to gather more information from tenants, to build his case against Reggie. That was the reason, the only reason. But when the door opened, and Brittany looked up from the folding table and smiled, something in his chest shifted. "You again," she said. Jordan sat down in the same plastic chair, could not stay away. Brittany laughed. The glamorous life of late-night laundry. The kids were with her again. Kayla was awake, this time sitting cross-legged on a chair, reading a book under the fluorescent light. Micah was asleep in his usual spot, wrapped in the same thin blanket. Brittany nodded toward the machines. Same drill, building machines still broken. "I'm starting to think Reggie just tells us what we want to hear." Jordan loaded his clothes and sat back down. This time the conversation came easier, like picking up where they had left off. Brittany asked what he did for work. Jordan had prepared for this. "I work in property management," he said. "Checking on buildings, making sure things run the way they should." Brittany raised an eyebrow. "Well, you should come check on my building. Nothing runs right there." Jordan kept his face neutral. But inside every word she said was another line in his report. "Tell me about it," he said. "Where do I start?" Brittany shook her head. "Hot water cuts out at least twice a week. I boil water on the stove so the kids can have a warm bath. The hallway lights on the 2nd floor have been out for 2 months. Mrs. Paulette fell last week because she could not see the stairs. And the front door lock. She lowered her voice. Anyone can walk in, at any time. I put a chair against my apartment door at night, just in case. Jordan felt his hands tighten against his knees. A chair against the door. That was how this woman kept her children safe at night. Because the man Jordan had hired to maintain the building could not be bothered to fix a lock, Brittany shifted the conversation. She told him about her mother, about the stroke, about the nursing home bills that ate through half her paycheck every month. She was not complaining, she was just talking. The way you talk to someone who listens. She told him about Curtis, how he had left without a word, how she used to lie awake, wondering what she did wrong. Then one morning she woke up and realized it did not matter. Some people are not built to stay, she said. I used to blame myself. Now I just focus on my kids. Jordan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something he had not planned to say. My mom was a single mom too, he said. She worked 2 jobs, used to bring me to a laundromat just like this one. I would fall asleep on the chairs while she folded clothes for other people. Brittany looked at him. Something shifted in her eyes. What happened to her? She passed, Jordan said. When I was 19. Before I could give her anything back, Brittany was quiet. The machines hummed. Then she said softly she would be proud of you. Jordan did not respond. Because if he opened his mouth, he would have to explain who he actually was. And he was not ready for that. Not yet. Just then Kayla looked up from her book and noticed Jordan. She studied him for a moment with the kind of directness only children have. Are you my mommy's friend Jordan? Looked at Brittany. Brittany smiled. Yeah, baby, he is. Kayla seemed satisfied with that. She went back to her book. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Before Brittany packed up to leave, she mentioned one more thing. Casually, like it was not the heaviest sentence she had spoken all night. Reggie put up a notice today, she said. Rent is going up 15% next month. I do not know how I am going to make it work. She paused. But I always figure something out. Jordan said nothing, but his knuckles were white against his knees. A rent increase. On a building where nothing worked, where the hot water failed, and the elevator was dead, and the front door did not lock, and the man collecting those checks was pocketing the maintenance money. Brittany gathered Micah in one arm, took Kayla's hand, and walked toward the door. She turned back. Same time next week. Jordan nodded. I will be here. The door closed behind her. Jordan walked out of that laundromat carrying something heavier than any briefcase he had ever held. He was carrying her story, and he could not put it down. The following Monday morning, Jordan called an emergency meeting in his office. Just 3 people, Tanya, his head of legal, a woman named Vivian Cross, and his chief financial officer, Gerald Hayes. He closed the door. What I am about to show you does not leave this room, Jordan said. He pulled up the audit on the conference screen. For the next hour, they went through the numbers line by line, and with every line, the picture got worse. Reggie Crawford had not just been neglecting Ridgewood Terrace, he had been systematically draining it. The audit covered 3 buildings under Reggie's management. Ridgewood Terrace was the largest. Over 3 years, Reggie had been allocated more than $1.2 million in combined maintenance budgets. The actual amount spent on repairs across all 3 buildings was roughly $450,000. The rest, more than $750,000, had been funneled through fake vendor invoices, inflated repair costs, and work orders for jobs that were never completed. Tanya pulled up specific examples. A plumbing company called DuPont Pipe Services had billed Ridgewood Terrace $68,000 over 2 years. The company did not exist. The address listed on the invoices was a vacant lot in Decatur. An electrical contractor had supposedly rewired the fire alarm system on 4 floors for $42,000. The fire alarm system on those floors had not worked in 2 winters. Jordan sat in his chair and read every page. His face was still, but his right hand was gripping the arm of his chair so hard the leather was creasing. Vivian spoke first. This is fraud. Clear government. We have enough to refer this to the district attorney's office right now. Jordan shook his head. Not yet. "What do you mean not yet?" Gerald asked. "I mean, I want everything Jordan said. Every fake invoice. Every vendor that does not exist. Every dollar he moved. I want the case so airtight that Reggie Crawford does not just lose his job. I want him to face a judge." He paused. "And I want to know if there are other buildings. Other managers doing the same thing." Gerald and Vivian exchanged a look. "This could take weeks," Vivian said. "In the meantime," Jordan said, "people are living in those buildings. Kids are living in those buildings." He thought about Micah sleeping on the floor of a laundromat. He thought about Brittany putting a chair against her apartment door at night because the lock did not work. He thought about Mrs. Paulette falling in a dark hallway because nobody had changed a light bulb in 2 months. And he thought about his mother, Patricia Moore, who had lived in buildings just like this one, who had filed complaints that were never answered, who had kept her mouth shut because she was afraid that speaking up would get her evicted. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, millions of rental units in America failed basic safety inspections every year. Broken smoke detectors, no heat in winter, exposed wiring, mold, lead paint. And most of the tenants who lived in those buildings never reported it because they had nowhere else to go. Jordan knew the statistics. He just never thought the problem would be inside his own company. "I want the fire alarms fixed this week," Jordan said. "All 4 floors. And the front door lock. Send a crew from corporate. Tell Reggie it is a routine compliance check. Do not tell him we are investigating." "What about the rest of the repairs?" Tanya asked. "Start scheduling them, quietly. I do not want Reggie to know what is coming until we are ready to move." After everyone left, Jordan sat alone in his office. He pulled the granola bar out of his desk drawer. He had kept it. He did not know why. He just could not throw it away. He looked at the crumpled wrapper and thought about the woman who gave it to him. A woman who had nothing, who gave anyway, and who was living in a building that he owned, a building that was failing her. Jordan had built an empire on property, but somewhere along the way he had stopped seeing the people who lived inside it. That was about to change. Brittany got home from her cleaning shift at 12:45 in the morning. Her feet ached. Her back was stiff. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor because the elevator was still broken, fumbled with her keys, and then she saw it. A piece of paper taped to her door. White paper, black letters, official looking. She pulled it off and read it under the dim hallway light. Notice to vacate, 30 days. Lease violation, unauthorized occupant. Brittany read it again and again. Unauthorized occupant. She knew exactly what that meant. Mrs. Paulette, the 74-year-old woman from the 2nd floor who sometimes stayed overnight in Brittany's apartment when she watched the kids. The woman who had never asked for $1, who sang Micah lullabies and braided Kayla's hair and called them her grandbabies. That was the unauthorized occupant. Brittany's hands started shaking. She folded the paper carefully and put it in her purse. Then she went inside, checked on the kids who were asleep in their room, and sat down at the kitchen table. She did not cry. Not yet. The next morning after she dropped Kayla at school and Micah with Mrs. Paulette, Brittany went downstairs to Reggie Crawford's office. She knocked on the door. "Come in," Reggie said. He was sitting behind his desk, a big man with thick arms and a face that never seemed to move. Brittany placed the notice on his desk. "I need to talk to you about this." Reggie glanced at the paper and leaned back in his chair. "What about it? Mrs. Paulette is not an unauthorized occupant," Brittany said. "She is my neighbor. She helps me with my children. She stays over sometimes when I work late. That is all." Reggie shrugged. "Your lease says one adult resident. If someone else is sleeping in your unit, that is a violation." "She is 74 years old," Brittany said, keeping her voice steady, even though her hands were trembling at her sides. "She is not moving in. She is helping me with my kids because I work 2 jobs and I do not have anyone else." Reggie looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You have been complaining a lot lately. Filing reports. Making noise. This is my building, and I decide who stays." "This is not right," Brittany said. "You know this is not right." Reggie stood up. That was his answer. He opened the door. 30 days, Miss Simmons. Brittany walked out of that office, and her legs almost gave out in the hallway. She leaned against the wall and pressed her hand over her mouth. 30 days. She had 30 days to find a new apartment in a city where rent was climbing every month, with 2 kids, on a nursing assistant's salary. She spent her lunch break at work, calling legal aid. She was put on hold for 40 minutes before the line disconnected. She called back. Hold again. She tried a second number she found online. A recorded message told her to leave her name and someone would return her call within 5 to 7 business days. 5 to 7 business days. She had 30. She asked a coworker if she knew anything about tenant rights. The woman shook her head. She searched online during her break, but the language was dense and confusing. Words like material breach and habitual violation and right to cure. She did not know what any of it meant. She just knew she was being punished for speaking up. That night, after the kids were asleep, Brittany sat at the kitchen table and cried. She pressed her face into her hands and let it come. All of it. The exhaustion, the fear, the loneliness, the feeling of being so small in a system so big that nobody could even hear her. She cried until her chest hurt, and then she stopped. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She opened her old laptop, the one with the cracked screen that took 3 minutes to boot up, and she started writing. She wrote down every maintenance request she had ever filed, every date, every issue. She pulled up her emails and screenshot every complaint she had sent through the tenant portal. She took her phone and walked through the apartment, photographing the dripping faucet, the cracked tiles in the bathroom, the mold forming in the corner of Micah's room, the broken lock on the building's front door. She did not know why she was doing it. She just felt like she needed to. Like if she could put it all in one place, maybe someone would finally listen. She did not know that 5 miles away someone already was. The next Tuesday at the laundromat, Jordan was already there when Brittany walked in. He saw her face immediately. Something was different. The light behind her eyes was dimmer. She sat down and started loading machines without saying anything. After a few minutes, Jordan spoke. "You okay?" Brittany did not answer right away. Then she said, "I got a notice from my building manager. He is trying to evict me." Jordan went still. "What?" 30 days, Brittany said. Her voice was calm, but her fingers were pulling at a thread on her sleeve. "He says, I have an unauthorized occupant. It is Mrs. Paulette, the elderly woman who watches my kids. She stays over sometimes. That is it." She looked at Jordan. "I have 30 days to find a new place. With 2 kids. On my salary. In this city." She paused. "I do not even know where to start." Jordan's jaw tightened. "What is the name of your building manager?" Brittany looked at him. "Reggie Crawford." Why his blood went cold. "Just curious," Jordan said, but his voice sounded different now. Harder. Brittany did not notice. She was too tired to notice much of anything. Brittany did not know it yet. But the man she was confiding in had the power to rewrite her entire situation with a single phone call. The question was, when would he make it? Jordan made the call at 6:15 the next morning. "Vivian, I need the eviction notice at Ridgewood Terrace reversed. Today. Apartment 314. Tenant named Brittany Simmons." Vivian Cross pulled up the file within the hour. The grounds were lease violation, unauthorized occupant. She reviewed the lease language, the building's guest policy, and the specific complaint Reggie had filed. "This does not hold up," Vivian told Jordan over the phone. "The lease allows overnight guests for up to 14 consecutive days. A neighbor who occasionally stays over to babysit does not constitute an additional occupant under any standard interpretation. This notice is retaliatory." He filed it 3 days after she submitted her latest batch of complaints. "Draft a letter," Jordan said, "from corporate, addressed to Reggie. The notice is rescinded, effective immediately. Make it clear that any further retaliatory action against any tenant will result in termination and legal consequences." Vivian paused. "You want to tip him off that we are watching?" "I want him to know that someone is watching," Jordan said, "even if he does not know who." The letter went out that afternoon. The next day, a maintenance crew showed up at Ridgewood Terrace. Not Reggie's usual guy. A real crew. 4 men in matching uniforms with a company truck parked outside. They started on the 3rd floor, fixed the hot water heater in the basement, replaced the broken washing machines in the laundry room, repaired the elevator, installed new locks on the front door, replaced the hallway lights on the 2nd floor, and went door to door checking smoke detectors and fire alarms on every floor. The tenants watched in disbelief. Mrs. Paulette stood in the hallway as the crew tested the elevator and shook her head. "Lord have mercy," she said. "Somebody must have called Jesus." Brittany came home from work that evening and found a letter in her mailbox. Official letterhead. More Capital Properties. She had never heard the name. The letter stated that the eviction notice, issued by building management, had been reviewed by the corporate office and was rescinded immediately. No action was required on her part. She read it 3 times. Then she sat on the stairs and pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. But these were different tears. She went downstairs and knocked on Reggie's door. "What happened?" she asked. "What do you mean the eviction?" "It was canceled, and there is a crew upstairs fixing everything." Reggie's face tightened. "Corporate decision," he said. "That is all I know." Brittany studied him. She did not believe him. But she did not push it. She went back upstairs and hugged her children, and for the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. Meanwhile, Reggie Crawford sat in his office with the door locked, staring at the letter from corporate. His hands were sweating. Someone was looking into him. He did not know who. He did not know how much they knew, but he could feel it closing in. He opened his laptop and started deleting files. Invoices, receipts, vendor contacts. He worked until 2 in the morning, erasing every trace he could find. But he was too late. Tanya had already copied everything. That same night, Jordan sat in his penthouse, looking out at the city. Tanya's words played in his head. "If you tell her now, she will think this was all pity, or worse, a transaction. Let the investigation finish first." She was right. He knew she was right, but it did not make it easier. Because every time he sat in that laundromat and listened to Brittany talk about her life, the lie between them grew heavier. She trusted him. She called him a friend. She let her daughter call him a friend. And he was keeping the biggest secret of all. Jordan was fixing her building. But he could not fix the lie growing between them. That Saturday, Jordan did something he had never done before. He asked Brittany to lunch. Not at the laundromat, not at 11 at night, during the day, like a normal person. "I know this little place on Ponce," he said the Tuesday before. "They have the best chicken and waffles in the city. You should bring the kids." Brittany hesitated. She did not let people into her children's lives easily. Curtis had taught her that. People leave. And when they leave, the kids are the ones who remember. But Kayla had been asking about Jordan, the man from the laundromat, Mommy's friend, and Brittany was tired. Not just physically. She was tired of doing everything alone. "Okay," she said, "but I am paying for myself." Jordan smiled. "I would not expect anything less." They met at a small diner near Ponce de Leon Avenue, checkered tablecloths, ceiling fans spinning slow, the kind of place where the waitress calls everyone honey and the sweet tea comes in mason jars. Kayla sat across from Jordan and studied him like a detective examining a suspect. "Do you have kids?" she asked. "No," Jordan said. "I do not." "Where do you live?" Jordan paused. "In the city. An apartment." "Is it big?" "It is okay," Jordan said carefully. "What is your favorite color?" Blue Jordan said without hesitation. "Same as mine," Kayla announced, and just like that, the interrogation was over. She went back to coloring the placemat with crayons the waitress had brought. Brittany shook her head, smiling. "She likes you. That is not easy to earn." Micah sat next to his mother, quiet as always. He ate his pancakes slowly, watching Jordan with wide eyes. He did not say much, but halfway through the meal, when they got up to leave the booth for a second, Micah reached out and took Jordan's hand. Just like that, small fingers wrapping around 2 of Jordan's. Jordan looked down. Then he looked at Brittany. Her eyes were wet. She turned away, quickly pretending to look for her purse. But Jordan saw it. He understood. This boy had never had a man hold his hand. Not once. After lunch, Jordan drove them to the park, Piedmont Park, the big one near Midtown. Kayla ran ahead immediately, heading for the swings. Micah followed more slowly, still holding Jordan's hand until they reached the playground. Then he let go and ran after his sister. Jordan and Brittany sat on a bench and watched them play. The sun was warm. The trees were green. Kids were laughing somewhere nearby. "When was the last time you did this?" Jordan asked. "Did what?" "Just sat somewhere. Without working? Without running?" Brittany thought about it. "I honestly do not remember." Jordan nodded. "Same." They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that happens when two people do not need to fill every space with words. Then Kayla ran over out of breath. "Jordan, I am doing a presentation at school about someone who makes a difference in my community. Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you make a difference?" Jordan looked at her. The question hit him harder than she could possibly know. Because right now, he was the owner of a building where her family was barely surviving. He was the man who had hired the manager who had tried to evict her mother. He was the person who could have prevented all of it if he had just paid attention sooner. "I am trying to," he said quietly. Kayla nodded satisfied and ran back to the swings. Brittany watched her go and then turned to Jordan. "You are good with them." Jordan shook his head. "They are good kids. You raised them right." Brittany looked at him for a long moment. Something was shifting behind her eyes. Something she was trying not to let in. "Do not do this to yourself," she thought. "You do not even know him." But she did know him, or she thought she did. She knew he was kind. She knew he listened. She knew he showed up every Tuesday night at a laundromat and folded her children's clothes like it was the most natural thing in the world. She knew her daughter asked about him and her son held his hand. And she knew that for the first time in years, sitting on a park bench in the afternoon sun, she felt something she had forgotten existed: peace. Later that evening, after Jordan had dropped them off and Brittany had taken the kids inside, he sat in his car outside Ridgewood Terrace. He watched her walk through the front door, the new lock he had installed, into the building he owned. He gripped the steering wheel and stared at the entrance for a long time. Because the truth was unavoidable now. He was not just trying to help her. He was not just trying to fix a building or catch a corrupt manager. He was falling in love with Brittany Simmons, and that changed everything. Because she did not know who he was. She did not know he owned the walls around her. She did not know that the man who sat next to her in the laundromat was the same man whose name was on her lease. He owned the building she walked into. He was falling for the woman who lived there. And she still had no idea who he was. It happened on a Wednesday night, 1:43 in the morning. Brittany was asleep in her bed with Micah curled against her side when she heard it. A sound like something groaning inside the walls, then a pop, then a rush. Water came pouring through the ceiling of the hallway outside her apartment like someone had turned on a fire hose. The main water pipe on the third floor had burst. Years of neglect, years of patches instead of repairs. Years of Reggie Crawford filing reports that said everything was fine, and now the pipe had given up. Water flooded the third-floor hallway within minutes. It ran under doors and seeped into apartments. It poured down the stairwell to the second floor. The lights in the hallway flickered once and then went dark. The electrical panel on the third floor had shorted out. Brittany heard screaming from down the hall. A woman shouting for help. A child crying somewhere below. She did not freeze. She grabbed Micah out of the bed, still half asleep, and put him on her back. She took Kayla's hand and pulled her into the hallway. The water was already ankle deep. Cold. The floor was slippery under her bare feet. She banged on every door she passed. "Get up. Get out. The water is rising. Get your kids and go downstairs." Then she thought of Mrs. Paulette. Second floor, right below the worst of the flooding. Mrs. Paulette, who moved slow. Mrs. Paulette, who could not see well in the dark. Mrs. Paulette, who lived alone. Brittany carried Micah down the stairs through water that was now cascading like a waterfall down the steps. She left both children with a neighbor in the lobby and ran back up. She found Mrs. Paulette's door and pounded on it. "Mrs. "Paulette, it is Brittany. Open the door." The old woman opened it in her nightgown, confused and frightened. Water was already pooling around her ankles. "What is happening? We need to go. Right now." Brittany took her arm and guided her through the dark hallway. Mrs. Paulette's slippers were soaked. She was shaking. Brittany held her steady with one hand and used the other to feel along the wall in the darkness. They made it to the stairs. One step at a time, slowly, carefully. By the time they reached the lobby, a dozen tenants were standing outside in the cold, some in pajamas, some wrapped in blankets, children crying, people on their phones trying to call Reggie. Nobody could reach him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Nobody knew where the main water shutoff valve was. Nobody except Mr. Franklin on the first floor, a man who had lived in the building for 11 years. He told Brittany it was in the basement. She went down alone. The basement was pitch black, and the floor was covered in 2 inches of water. She used the flashlight on her phone to find the valve. It was rusted and stiff. She turned it with both hands, her feet bracing against the wet concrete, until it finally closed. The water stopped. Upstairs, people were still panicking, but the flooding had stopped spreading. Brittany came back up the stairs, soaking wet, shivering, and found her children in the lobby. She wrapped them both in a blanket she had grabbed from someone's apartment and sat on the floor with them. Kayla was crying quietly. Micah was silent, his face buried in her neck. At 1:58 in the morning, Tanya called Jordan. The building monitoring system had flagged a major water event at Ridgewood Terrace. Jordan was out of bed in seconds. He did not call his driver. He grabbed his keys and drove himself. 15 minutes later, he pulled up to Ridgewood Terrace. The scene outside stopped him cold. Tenants standing on the sidewalk in the dark. Children in blankets. An old woman sitting in a folding chair someone had brought outside. And Brittany standing near the entrance, barefoot, wet, holding her 2 children against her chest. Jordan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then he got out of the car and went to work. He called the emergency plumbing crew that More Capital kept on retainer. He called the fire department to check the electrical system. He called Tanya and told her to arrange temporary housing for any tenants whose apartments were damaged. He moved through the scene, giving orders, making calls, coordinating, like he had done it 1,000 times. Because he had. Just never at this building. Never at 2 in the morning in jeans and a hoodie. Brittany watched him. She watched this man who she thought worked in property management take control of an emergency like he owned the place. "How do you know who to call?" she asked when he passed by her. "How did you get here so fast?" Jordan paused. "I have contacts," he said. "In the industry. I heard about the emergency through a monitoring service." Brittany looked at him. Something flickered behind her eyes, a question she was too exhausted to ask. "Jordan," she said quietly. "Thank you." He looked at her bare feet on the cold sidewalk, at Micah's face pressed against her shoulder, at Kayla holding her mother's hand with both of hers. "I am sorry," he said, and he meant it in more ways than she could possibly know. Brittany stood in the cold, holding her children, watching a man she thought was ordinary command the scene, like he owned it. Because he did. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up in front of Ridgewood Terrace at 8:15. Jordan Moore stepped out. But not the Jordan that Brittany knew. This Jordan wore a charcoal gray suit, Italian shoes, a watch that caught the morning sun. He was followed by Tanya Vivian Cross from legal and 2 men carrying file boxes. The tenants who were outside stopped and stared. Reggie Crawford was in his office on the first floor. He heard the commotion and came out. When he saw Jordan, his face changed. The color drained out of it like water running out of a sink. He recognized the man immediately. Not from the laundromat, from the corporate headshots, from the company website, from the signature at the bottom of his employment contract. "Mr. Moore," Reggie said. His voice cracked on the second word. Jordan did not shake his hand. He walked past him and into the office. "Sit down," Jordan said. Reggie sat. Jordan placed a folder on the desk and opened it. For the next 10 minutes, he laid it all out. $750,000 in misappropriated funds across 3 buildings over 3 years. Fabricated vendor invoices from companies that did not exist. Maintenance reports filed as resolved for work that was never done. Fire alarm systems that had not functioned in 2 winters. An elevator that had been listed as repaired, but had not moved in 5 months. And a burst water pipe that had flooded 4 apartments and put dozens of people, including children, at risk. All because the man sitting across from him had decided that their safety was not worth his time. Reggie tried to speak. There must be some misunderstanding. I can explain the invoices. The vendors were. Jordan held up his hand. People could have been hurt last night, Jordan said. His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it that made Reggie stop talking. Children could have been hurt. A 74-year-old woman had to be carried out of her apartment in the dark because you could not be bothered to maintain the plumbing in this building. You are terminated effective immediately. Your access to all Moore Capital properties is revoked, and this file is being forwarded to the district attorney's office this afternoon. Reggie's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the folder on his desk, at the stack of evidence, at the legal team standing behind Jordan. He had nothing left to say. Security escorted him out 10 minutes later. He carried a single cardboard box. He did not look at anyone as he walked through the lobby, but the tenants looked at him. They stood in the hallway and watched the man who had ignored their complaints for years walk out the front door for the last time. And then they looked at the man in the suit who had made it happen. Jordan stood in the hallway speaking with Tanya. His back was to the stairwell. He did not see Brittany, but Brittany saw him. She had come down when she heard the noise. She was standing at the top of the stairs with Kayla beside her, looking down into the first-floor hallway. She saw Jordan in his suit. She saw the legal team. She saw the file boxes. And then she heard Tanya say 5 words that changed everything. Mr. Moore. We will handle the paperwork. Mr. Moore. Brittany's hand gripped the stairwell railing. Mr. Moore, the man from the laundromat. The man who folded her children's clothes, the man who bought them chicken and waffles and played chase in the park with her son, the man she had been falling for slowly, carefully against every instinct that told her not to. His name was Moore. He owned this building. He owned the broken pipes and the dead elevator and the front door that had not locked for months. He owned all of it. Brittany stepped back from the railing. She took Kayla's hand. She walked back to her apartment. She closed the door. She locked it, and the walls she had been slowly lowering, the ones she had built after Curtis left, the ones Jordan had been carefully, patiently finding his way through, slammed shut. Jordan fired the man who had been failing his tenants, but in doing so he had revealed himself to the one person he was not ready to face. That evening, Jordan stood outside, apartment 314. He raised his hand and knocked. 3 quiet knocks. The door opened. Brittany stood there. She was wearing the same clothes from that morning. Her eyes were red, but her face was still. She did not invite him in. She just stood there, blocking the doorway with her body like a wall. You lied to me, she said. Her voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was worse than that. It was flat. Like she had already cried, and there was nothing left. Jordan opened his mouth. Brittany, you lied to me, she said again. I sat next to you in that laundromat, and I told you about my life, about my kids, about my dead-end job, and my sick mother, and how I could not afford to move. And the whole time you owned this building, you owned the broken pipes, and the broken elevator, and the broken lock on the front door. You owned the apartment. I put a chair against the door to feel safe in. You owned all of it. Jordan stood there and took it. Because she was right. Brittany, I did not go to that laundromat to deceive you. Let me finish, Brittany said. Her hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. Every time I told you about Reggie, you already knew. Every time I complained about the hot water or the machines or the lock, you could have fixed it right then with one phone call. But you did not. You sat there and you listened and you nodded and you let me keep struggling while you investigated. She paused. Do you know what that feels like? To find out the person you trusted already had the power to help you and chose to wait. Jordan's throat was tight. I was trying to build a case against Reggie. If I had acted too soon. I know why you waited, Brittany interrupted. I understand the logic, but logic does not make it hurt less. Jordan took a breath. You are right. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid. Afraid of what Brittany asked. Afraid you would think I was pitying you. That everything between us was just some rich man playing savior. I was afraid you would push me away. And I was afraid I would lose you before I even had you. Brittany stared at him. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were glistening, but she would not let the tears fall. Was any of it real? She asked. The question hung in the air between them. The laundromat. The conversations. The park with my kids. Micah, holding your hand. Was any of that actually you? Or was it the billionaire playing? Poor Jordan looked at her. Every word he said. Every single moment. That was the realest I have been in years, Brittany. You are the first person who saw me as just a guy doing laundry on a Tuesday night. Not as Jordan Moore on a Forbes list. Not as someone who owns buildings. Just a person. I did not want to lose that. He paused. I did not want to lose you. Brittany was quiet for a long time. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the new lights that his crew had installed. Then she spoke. I need time. Jordan nodded. I understand. I do not know how long, she said, and I do not know if I can get past this. But I need time. Okay, Jordan said. I will be here. Brittany looked at him one more time. Then she stepped back and closed the door. Gently, not a slam, but final. Jordan stood in the hallway. He pressed his hand flat against the door. He could hear Micah's voice inside asking who was at the door, and Brittany's voice answering, nobody, baby. Go back to your puzzle. Jordan dropped his hand and walked down the hallway. He had built a career on closing deals. But this was the one door he could not force open. Sometimes the truth sets you free, and sometimes it just shows you exactly what you are about to lose. 2 days passed. Brittany did not call Jordan. She did not go to the laundromat. She went to work. She came home. She cooked dinner. She helped Kayla with homework. She put the kids to bed. And then she sat alone in the kitchen and tried to figure out what she was feeling. On the 3rd day, she knocked on Mrs. Paulette's door. The old woman opened it and took one look at Brittany's face and said, come sit down, baby. They sat at Mrs. Pangon's small kitchen table with cups of tea that neither of them drank. Mrs. Paulette listened while Brittany told her everything. About Jordan. About who he really was. About the laundromat and the lies and the truth that came crashing through all of it. When Brittany finished, Mrs. Paulette was quiet for a long time. Then she said, baby, in 74 years, I have learned one thing. People are not what they own. They are what they do when nobody is watching. And that man helped me out of my apartment when the water came in. Before he even knew you were looking, he carried my arm down those stairs in the dark. And he did not do it because he owned the building. He did it because he saw an old woman who needed help. Brittany stared at her tea. That night, she called her mother. Denise's voice was tired but warm. She always sounded like that, like she was exhausted but still glad to hear from her daughter. Brittany told her everything. The same story, different listener. When she finished, her mother asked a question. Did he ever ask you for anything? Brittany thought about it. No. Did he ever make you feel small? No. Did your children feel safe with him? Brittany closed her eyes. She thought of Micah reaching for Jordan's hand crossing the street. She thought of Kayla calling him mommy's friend. Yes, Brittany said quietly. They did. Then why are you running, baby? Brittany did not answer. Because the answer was the thing she was most afraid of. She was not running from Jordan. She was running from the possibility that it was real. Because if it was real and it fell apart, she did not know if she could survive that again. The next Tuesday night, Brittany walked into the laundromat on 8th Street. Alone. No kids, no laundry. She sat down in the same plastic chair she always sat in and looked around. The same buzzing lights, the same humming machines, the same cracked tile floor. She thought about the first night, Jordan walking in with his bag of laundry, the way he folded Micah's tiny jeans without being asked, the granola bar he held like it was made of gold. She thought about his voice when he talked about his mother, the scar on his palm, the way he looked at her children like they mattered. And she realized something. None of those moments required money. None of them required a penthouse or a company or a name on a building. Those moments were just two people being honest with each other in a laundromat at 11 at night. That was real. She pulled out her phone and called his number. He picked up on the first ring, like he had been waiting. "Can you come to the laundromat?" she asked. "I will be there in 15 minutes, he said. He was there in 10. He walked through the door in jeans and a hoodie. The same hoodie from that first night. Brittany almost smiled. Almost. They sat next to each other. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Then Brittany said, "I am not going to pretend it does not matter that you lied. It does. It matters a lot." Jordan nodded. "But I also know who you were in this laundromat," she continued. "And that person, not the billionaire, not the building owner, that person is who I want. If he still exists." Jordan looked at her. "He is right here," he said. "He never left." Brittany held his gaze. "No more lies. No more protecting me from the truth. If this is going to work, I need to be your equal. Not your charity case. Not your project. Your equal." Jordan reached over and took her hand. "You were never my charity case, Brittany. You were my wake-up call." They stood in that laundromat at midnight, surrounded by the hum of machines and the smell of clean laundry, and they chose each other. Not because of money, not despite it, but because of what they had found between the lies and the truth. Something honest. Something rare. Something worth fighting for. 1 year later, Brittany was sitting in a classroom at Atlanta Technical College taking notes. She was halfway through her healthcare administration certificate. She attended classes 3 evenings a week after her shift at Magnolia Gardens. Jordan had offered to pay the tuition. Brittany had said yes, but only as a loan. She had a repayment plan typed up and signed. Jordan had tried to argue. Brittany had not budged. That is who she was. She had moved out of Ridgewood Terrace 6 months earlier. Not into Jordan's penthouse, into a 2-bedroom apartment in a different building. A clean one, a safe one. She paid rent every month. Jordan's name was on the deed. Brittany's name was on the lease. And she paid every dollar on time, because that was the deal. Ridgewood Terrace was a different place now. Jordan had launched a program called Tenant Voice across all of his properties, a direct line from tenants to corporate. No more relying on building managers to relay complaints. No more reports that said everything was fine when nothing was. Reggie Crawford had been charged with fraud and embezzlement. The case was still moving through the courts, but the evidence was overwhelming. He would not be managing anyone's building ever again. Mrs. Paulette's apartment had been completely renovated. New floors, new kitchen, new bathroom. When she saw it for the first time, she stood in the doorway and cried. Then she looked at Brittany and said, "I told you somebody called Jesus." On a Thursday afternoon in October, Kayla stood in front of her 2nd grade class and gave her presentation. The assignment was simple. Talk about someone who makes a difference in your community. Some kids picked firefighters. Some picked teachers. One kid picked a football player. Kayla picked her mother. She stood at the front of the room with a piece of paper in her hands and read out loud, "My mom's name is Brittany. She works at a place where she takes care of old people. She also cleans offices at night. She makes us pancakes every morning, even when she is tired. She helps Mrs. Paulette carry her groceries. She reads to the kids in our building on Saturdays. She taught me that being rich is not about money. It is about how you treat people. My mom is the richest person I know." The teacher wiped her eyes. So did 2 of the parents sitting in the back. Brittany was not there. She was at work. But Kayla told her about it that evening, word for word, and Brittany held her daughter and cried in the good way. That same week on a Tuesday night, Jordan and Brittany sat in the laundromat on 8th Street. They did not need to be there. Brittany's new apartment had working machines. Jordan had never needed to do laundry there in the first place. But they came anyway. It had become their thing, their place. Kayla sat on a plastic chair doing math homework. Micah was next to her, drawing a picture of a dog he wanted but could not have yet. Jordan stood at the folding table, folding a small pair of jeans with 2 quick motions. The same way he had that first night. Brittany watched him and smiled. "This is where it all started," she said. Jordan looked at her. "No," he said. "This is where we started. It started with a laundromat and 2 people who had more in common than either of them knew. It started with a granola bar and a conversation between 2 strangers at 11 at night. Sometimes the people who change your life do not arrive in limousines. They sit next to you on a plastic chair, and they see you, really see you, when the rest of the world has looked away. And if you or someone you know is living in a building where things are not being maintained, where complaints go unanswered, where you feel unsafe, please know that you have rights. Every tenant in America has the right to a safe and habitable home. You can reach out to your local legal aid office or contact the Department of Housing and Urban Development. You do not have to fight alone. Someone is listening. This story is a work of fiction. The characters, names, and events are entirely made up, but the themes are real. Tenant neglect is real. The struggles of single mothers working 2 jobs to keep their families together are real. And the power of genuine human connection that is the most real thing of all. I wrote this story because I believe that stories can change how we see each other. Personally, what hit me hardest while putting this together was Brittany's question. Was any of it real? I think we all ask that sometimes. In a world full of masks and filters, we are all looking for someone who is real, someone who sees us for who we are, not what we have. If this story reminded you of that, then it did its job. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Every share helps this channel grow and helps more people hear stories like this one. I will see you in the next one. Take care of each other.